In the aftermath of World War I, Australian soldiers returned home to farm. The government encouraged them to cultivate wheat in Western Australia, but harsh conditions, poor soil, and falling grain prices caused deep frustration. Then came another blow. Tens of thousands of emus migrated inland. They trampled crops, knocked down fences, and devastated fields. The farmers could no longer protect their livelihoods. Desperate for help, the farmers turned to the federal government. They requested military assistance, hoping for swift intervention. Officials agreed to deploy soldiers with machine guns. The mission was led by Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery. 2 Lewis guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition were issued. It was the beginning of a campaign unlike any before. In November 1932, the soldiers traveled to Campion in Western Australia. They encountered groups of emus roaming the farmland in large numbers. The birds, nearly 2 meters tall, moved quickly and unpredictably. When the soldiers opened fire, the emus scattered in every direction. Few were hit and most escaped unharmed. The soldiers realized this would not be a simple task. Another attempt was made near a dam where 1,000 emus had gathered. The soldiers waited until the birds were close, then fired. But the gun jammed after only a few birds were killed. The rest fled into the scrub, vanishing within seconds. The terrain was rough and the birds were surprisingly agile. The operation quickly descended into frustration. The soldiers mounted a machine gun on the back of a truck. They hoped to chase the emus and fire while in motion. But the terrain made the ride too bumpy to aim properly. The birds outran the vehicle with ease. The gun was almost useless under those conditions. That experiment was abandoned shortly after. Major Meredith and his men continued their efforts for days. They found the emus highly coordinated and difficult to track. The birds would split into small groups to confuse the attackers. Every engagement ended with minimal results. Despite firing hundreds of rounds, few emus were killed. The operation began to draw criticism from the public. Newspapers reported on the events with a mixture of disbelief and humor. Articles questioned how a trained military force could fail so completely. The term emu war began to appear in headlines. The soldiers, frustrated and embarrassed, continued to try new tactics. By the end of the first week, only a few dozen birds had been killed. The emus seemed unaffected and continued damaging crops. The soldiers requested more time and additional ammunition. Officials debated whether the operation should continue. Pressure from farmers pushed for renewed action. Eventually, permission was given for a second phase. The troops returned with new determination and adjusted strategies. This time, they focused on smaller groups of birds. The new approach had modest success. Several hundred emus were eventually shot, but the numbers were still far short of expectations. Estimates placed the total emu population in the tens of thousands. The impact of the military effort was negligible. The fields remained overrun and the crops continued to suffer. By early December, the military command reviewed the campaign. The operation was deemed ineffective and a waste of resources. Major Meredith and his team were withdrawn from the area. The government declared the campaign officially over. Roughly 1,000 emus had been killed in total. The rest continued to roam freely through the farmland. The outcome was viewed as a failure, both strategically and symbolically. Farmers felt abandoned, and the military was left humiliated. The birds had proven to be too difficult to manage with conventional force. The event became a unique footnote in Australian history. It was one of the only times the military had been deployed against animals, and the animals had won. Following the failure, alternative methods were explored. The government introduced bounty systems for emu culling. Farmers were given incentives to hunt and remove the birds. Fencing and land management practices were improved. Over time, the emu threat was reduced through non-military means, but the memory of the failed campaign lingered. Today, the emu war stands as a surreal chapter in history. It reminds us that not all problems can be solved with force, that strategy must be suited to the challenge at hand, and that nature often defies human expectations. Australia never declared war on emus again, but the story lives on, strange and unforgettable.